Welcome back, dear listener. This is Brian and the esteemed Mr. Betcher for breaking down security.
Hello.
This week is a it's kind of a review for us. We've done this. We've done some of this topic before with Guillaume Ross about various facets of cloud, but we wanted to talk about cloud security in particular. So we got a couple of gentlemen from FireHost, which is a managed security services provider in the Dallas, Texas area, and they've been gracious enough to come on. So I'd like to welcome Chase and Jeff to the show. Welcome, gentlemen, to Breaking Down Security.
Great to be here.
Thank you
Awesome.
very much. Glad to be here.
All right. So, gentlemen, I want to start with Chase because I see him on my go-to meeting, and then we'll do Jeff. I just wanted to get a quick background of who you are and what you do at FireHost, and maybe a little bit about your background in InfoSec or information technology.
I'm the threat intelligence lead for the security operations group. I also work on some of the research and innovation projects around virtualization. My background is I'm a retired U.S. Navy cryptologic chief. I did about 14 plus years working for the military. I got medically retired thanks to some combat injuries, and I was fortunate enough to spend basically my entire career working for the NSA. So I spent a large part of my life working at Fort Meade or some other different remote locations that they would sort of send me to, and I did everything from information to security to real-time operations, close access ops, things like that. It was a blast. It was a great career. I also did some work for the DoD in the areas of missile space and security, and basically have focused my sort of growth really in the areas around how we do real security, how we actually leverage intelligence and things along those lines. And then I was fortunate enough to get to know Jeff a couple years ago, and we wound up working at the same shop together. So it's just been fortuitous.
Right on. Jeff, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeff Schilling. Like Chase, I have a military background. I'm a retired Army colonel, retired back in 2012. Pretty much was an IT infrastructure type of specialty in the military up until my last two assignments, where I took more of a cybersecurity focus, where I ran the Security and Operations Center for the Department of Defense, the Global NOSC, for an organization called Joint Task Force Global Network Operations, which later became Cyber Command.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I did that for a couple of years, and I was there during some of the largest data breaches that happened inside of DoD, and so it was a very interesting 2 years. They moved me over to the Army, and I took over the Army's Global Security and Operations Center at Fort Belvoir, and that was my last assignment that I did with the military. So I got a very strong background in nation-state level hackers and attacks, and then I was fortunate enough to get a job running an incident response practice for a major corporation as a professional services practice for 18 months, which was a great orientation to the cyber threat as I left DoD to understand what the threats were in the civilian sector, because I felt like my DoD experience really only grounded me in understanding how to address the nation-state cyber espionage, and it's a different element in the cyber threats inside of the commercial world that I live now, and it was my hopes never to go back to government work. So then I was fortunate after 18 months of learning what I thought I could learn from seeing hundreds of clients go through breaches and seeing the root cause of a lot of these breaches. I was given the opportunity to become the chief security officer at FireHost, because I believe, it's kind of counterintuitive the way most security people think, but I actually believe that the cloud is our best opportunity to get the initiative back from the threat. And I'm sure we'll get into those discussions later on today, but that's one of the reasons I am where I am, is because I purposely wanted to go and be, run a security team that's securing the cloud, because I think that's our best opportunity.
All right, so I have a scenario here, and I put that in our show notes here. So I'm an old company. I've been doing the traditional data center for a while, and our CEO was ousted because third quarter profits were well below expectations. The new CEO comes in, he's a young buck, he wants to turn profits around, and the first thing he says is we're going to put everything into the cloud. So my question is, as the uh, chief information officer or chief, maybe even the chief financial officer or the C-level folks, is um, if I was a company like that, what would be the first? How would I go about putting things from a traditional data center into the cloud and do it in a way that is going to be um, as secure as possible? Do I, how would you come in if you were FireHost and, well, I mean, you are FireHost, but I mean, if your people came in an engagement and said, okay, here's how you're going to do that. Here would be a plan to put you into our enclave, if you will.
So I'll jump at this first, and I'll hand it off to Chase. First, this is a watch and repeat scenario for us almost on a daily basis. This is we, for a lot of our customers, are the first time that they, especially for the very security conscious customers, or the customer that you described as never doesn't understand the cloud, or is very apprehensive about the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
They come to a provider like us because we're a full service provider, and that's what I would look for, is someone who is not only securing their own infrastructure and provides the documentation to prove that they are securing their own infrastructure, but also can help me, because I wouldn't be putting my stuff in the cloud if I could secure it myself or could manage it myself, but also help me secure it with a security team that's actually watching my environment and looking for threat actor activity on my inside of my infrastructure that they're hosting for me. Because right now, most of the companies that you see out there, when you see their merit badges, that they're PCI compliant, HIPAA compliant. When you really dig into the fine details, it's kind of like looking at that used car ad that has the little tiny writing. What that says is that they meet the compliance. They have the security controls for physical security, and in a lot of cases up to the hypervisor level. But anything above the hypervisor, at the OS and application layers, all on the customer, and that doesn't get you much better than, and in a lot of cases, the networking layer as well. That doesn't get you much better off than you were when you were hosting it yourself. So, the first question you ask yourself is, what are the objectives I'm really trying to achieve? If I'm trying to achieve better security, then I'm going to look for a full service provider that gives me security all the way up the stack. Because in order to gain that advantage in protecting your environment in the cloud, you really have to have visibility at all layers of the stack. And I'll throw it over to Chase to see if he's got any additional thoughts.
I think for me, one of the things that I would automatically think about and consider is, like, what is the pedigree of the individuals that are actually there that are going to be the ones during the onboarding process? Is it just you're going to hand your stuff over to somebody and basically they sort of hope that you're able to get your systems migrated to the cloud, securely and operationally without causing impact, or are they going to bill you to death on professional services for trying to get things migrated? The questions around, what is my cloud provider actually going to take care of for me? Because honestly, that's the reason that folks are trying to move to the cloud anyway, is they want things to be easier, they want speed, they want redundancy, they want things just to grow naturally instead of the old paradigm of, I need an IT guy to do this all the time. If you're going to move stuff to the cloud, you should absolutely be able to provide, to ask your provider, what are you going to do for me? And if it doesn't do better than what you have right now, that would be where I'd start asking that question about, well, what do I really need to move to the cloud? I don't need to spend, my entire IT budget for the year migrating to the cloud when my provider is not going to fix all these issues by the migration. So why don't we just migrate the really important stuff and lock that down in the cloud environment, and then we'll focus on that for our cloud migration. There's no reason to move everything when you don't have to move everything. It's cost prohibitive, even though it sounds sexy and cool. Cloud migration should be something that's planned and is a sort of forethought evolution of the growth of the company, rather than let's go just dump it in there and use cloud.
Sure.
What aspects of IT should not be moved to the cloud?
I, for me, I don't think that there's.
Honestly,
I was going to say I would look at it. One thing I think if you do it right in the cloud can be more secure than you can in your own infrastructure. The data-centric model and cloud model, if the architecture is built right in that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 model of web server, application server, database server, if you architect and have the proper security controls and segmentation in place, you can put just about anything that fits that model into the cloud. So I would look at it from more not necessarily a security discriminator on whether or not I get it to the cloud, but performance. There are some applications that just don't perform well in the cloud environment, and there are some applications that perform better in the cloud. It really depends on how they're tuned and what the level of latency tolerance is. One of the things I don't see that works very well is a lot of desktop virtualization. You see this as a trend for a lot of organizations that are really trying to cut back. But maybe I'm a little bit latent in my experience with it. Maybe it's come a better. It's come a long way in the last year or so since I've talked to folks who've done that. But those type of things I've seen don't work very well in virtualization and going to the cloud. But as far as anything else, security shouldn't be, if you do it right in the cloud, you should be more secure.
What do you mean by desktop virtualization? You mean like developers testing their software? What?
Some folks will have their desktops, they remote into their desktop environment to run their applications. Their computer is basically a dumb terminal. And I've seen this with a lot of not necessarily, I've seen companies that have, especially in the medical field, that are going in this direction, so that they don't have to manage all these virtualized desktops. I haven't seen that perform well. I think that it's a pretty good model if you're managing it yourself in a cloud environment inside of your own wide area network. But I can't think of anything else that doesn't perform well in a cloud environment. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yes, even real-time, say, transaction processing.
Yeah, like I say, it's all in the, there are some, we run some high transaction processes inside of our environment, and the way those architectures work, the customers have a direct link-to-link connection into our environment, and so so we become basically extension of their corporate infrastructure, and we haven't seen many performance issues there, but there's always going to be some applications that just don't virtualize very well, or that don't work well in the cloud model. But we have some pretty, we host a lot of security companies that have some really high, go through a lot of big data crunching, and those workloads work very well for us, inside of our infrastructure.
So when you're migrating companies over, or you've got a company that is, attempting to put their applications into your managed cloud, do you try to accommodate them with what they're using? So let's say they're using, I don't know, something other than WordPress for their CMS, and they're using a lot of maybe they're a Mac shop, so they're using a lot of Mac services. Do you attempt to standardize across your entire domain, or do you allow them to run basically whatever they want inside of your managed cloud?
So we standardize the operating systems that we support, and as long as the application runs on the operating systems, we're about 50% Windows server environment and 50% Linux.
Mm-hmm.
And we run many different flavors of Linux. As long as the application works on those platforms, we'll support it. There are a few CMS that CMS applications that we don't support. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know that some customers have moved off of our infrastructure because they've decided to use a content management system that we don't support or doesn't work on one of our operating systems. So that's kind of where our standardization, because that's what we take responsibility as far as compliance and security up to the OS level, to making sure that that the operating system that's presented to the customer is compliant with all the security and has all the security controls in place. And then it's up to the customer to manage that application layer.
All right. So do you ever go in when you're doing these kinds of things, and let's say the company you're working on has had an extensive data center? Do you ever find any companies that are just not ready to be put into the cloud? I mean, they have, they're using Windows XP, they're out of date processes, they're using ancient technology, legacy applications, and they're just not ready to get to that point. As part of a managed service provider, do you help them get up to where they need to be, or do you just say, well, obviously, if you're a business, you're not going to say, "Yeah, sorry, we can't help you." How do you help a company that is using, say, legacy technology get into the cloud? I mean, do you just virtualize it and then help them update later, or are you helping them on the back end try to be more secure when they go into your managed cloud?
So we don't see that a lot in our vertical, because most of the people that come to us for one or two reasons. First reason is they've already been breached and they know that they can't secure a particular application or database inside of their environment, so they come to us because we have a security team that will help them with that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or they have a regulatory requirement. They're either a subcontractor to a major, Fortune 100 company or to a large enterprise that requires that they meet certain levels of compliance and have to actually show the documentation for that level of compliance to show that they are in, operating their application or SaaS from a either PCI DSS 3.0 compliant environment or a HIPAA high trust or high tech compliant environment. So those are most of the use cases we see. And the third use case that happens quite a bit as well is just security companies that know when they go and talk about their, if they have a cloud instantiation that supports their security offering or their security service, that they know that they have to be able to provide that due diligence to most large corporations have got it now, that they've got to vet all their vendors and all the software as a service capabilities that enter into their environment. They have to go back to those vendors and say, how are you meeting the required security controls and who's protecting those capabilities if their corporate data is going to be in there. So I wouldn't say, for most of the companies that we are, who are, to kind of describe your scenario, are sticking their toe in the water for their first swing at the cloud. What we see, the first thing that they will come to us for, and this is a use case that we watch and repeat a lot on, is a secure dev environment. Because one of the things, even large enterprises, and in fact, I would say most of our large enterprise customers who run their own data centers and could probably do this work themselves, what they don't have the ability to do is the elasticity that a cloud service provider like us provides to grow a dev environment, allow the developers to work those final stages before it goes to QA and production with live production data that's regulated. That's a use case that takes months, if not a year inside, for an IT organization inside of a company to be able to provide, to show that they can provide that compliant environment, that safe compliant environment for someone to do that workload. Whereas we can spin that up, depending on how complex, anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. So I would say that's probably what we see the most as far as those new people who are trying their first foray into the cloud, is they start with a dev environment. And then once they feel like they have good communication and good a good feeling that this service is going to work for them, then we'll see them maybe move one production workload to us, and then it just kind of grows and grows from there.
So, Jeff, was it you who said that you went from government to private sector for about 18 months and saw tons of breaches? What were what were most of the root causes there, and how can moving to the cloud help those out?
You know, what I saw most was a human capital shortage. When I say human capital, I'm talking about security people who actually know how to leverage. There's a lot of great security technology out there. And in almost every case, when my forensic investigators went in to do an investigation, what we found was that the technology detected the problem, and actually detected it in a way that someone who was actually leveraging the information you can get from security controls in the right way through their security incident event management system probably would have seen and caught the threat actors pretty early in the kill chain. And the second root cause that I saw, so that was the first one, was not having the right people who understood how to leverage the technology and actually detect early on the threat actors inside the environment. The second root cause that I saw was, and this is shocking, was security people not securing their security infrastructure. I mean, it was amazing. It was, IDS and IPS is out of patch tolerance, or WAF not patched, no configuration. No configuration control, no updated signatures. In some cases, we found that they had security devices in line that had no countermeasures in them at all. Nothing loaded. The machine was just on and had a green light. And I think that my IT infrastructure background, it's one of the first things that I said when I took over the job at FireHost is the first screen that I wanted up in our SOC was the visibility and availability of our security controls and all of our security devices. We have about 35 across our environment. I wanted to know that they were available, they're working, and they're passing data the way they should be. And so those are probably the two main root causes that I saw, were usually human failures, not understanding the technology, and then people not managing their security infrastructure.
Okay, so both of those have to do with having enough people or the right people on your security team. Is that what I'm getting at, or is that right?
Right. I wrote an article a couple months ago for Dark Reading talking about the deficit. We're short about 200,000 trained security professionals across the U.S. industrial complex.
Yeah, we saw that's very similar to what we got when we discussed the Leviathan report that said there was a critical lack of good or information security professionals out there. So it's that's an interesting question about how to get our ranks up to be able to start securing the our data and our customers in the industry.
So how does cloud help mitigate that?
Well,
or does it?
It does if you go to the right. Again, it goes to what Chase was talking about knowing your provider and what their human capabilities are. What's the pedigree of the security staff that's watching your environment, and what are they watching in your environment? If you go to some of the major cloud security or the cloud providers out there, the IaaS providers, and you ask them, hey, can I see some bios for your security team? The answer you normally get is, well, our security people don't like to have their bios out there. And they usually do that for one or two reasons. One, because they don't really have a good bio to show, or they're paranoid security people who don't like to share their background. But I think that is, you're right. It doesn't do you any good to go to the cloud if you don't solve this human capital problem on security, because you're just basically moving the risk from your environment to a cloud environment. And then when you look at the indemnity clauses for the cloud providers, they're not going to really be responsible if you're breached. So that's a conversation. Some cloud providers are better than others about allowing companies to come in and do due diligence, especially if you're a big spender inside their infrastructure. I'm sure if you go to AWS and you have $1 million a month spend with them, I'm sure you can get some of those answers, to those questions. To say if you're a medium-sized business and you have a $4,000 a month spend with them, are you going to be able to get those same transparency? Probably not.
So we've thrown around a bunch of terms. You mentioned SaaS. We've mentioned IaaS. Maybe we could go over what these various different as a services are for people who are maybe interested in moving into the cloud. Maybe uh, infrastructure as a service, for instance, is more what they want to do because they or maybe they don't want, like you guys, you're a hands off kind of thing. You manage everything and deal with the content. So um, maybe you could explain a little bit about what your IaaS and your PaaS and your SaaS do or are, and how you guys fit in with into that model.
So for FireHost, we are strictly infrastructure as a service. Um, for some of our customers, we will provide third-party vendors that may come in and provide a platform as a service, like we have third-party vendors that will come in and do database management for customers that want to pay for that. We don't do that ourselves. So, and then most of the people that host with us, I'd say probably anywhere from 60 to 70% are SaaS providers themselves. We don't. Our only software as a service that we have is our portal that allows our customers to manage their infrastructure inside of our environment. So really our play is strictly at the infrastructure as a service and the security of that infrastructure as a service, and not so much the other two elements.
Okay, so you basically just supply servers, powers, network, the VM, but they manage, most of your clients manage the OS, they manage their data, they manage their applications. So when they push
Well,
their data,
we manage the OS.
okay, you
Yeah,
manage the
everything
OS.
else.
So you're a bit of a hybrid in the IaaS field, according to the.
Yeah, that'd be fair.
Okay. Um, do you have? Because see, I work for a company that does a lot inside of does a lot inside the cloud. So a lot of our problems are making sure the data is protected not only from bad guys, but also maybe from insider threat, but also from our own provider. Because as we've seen in the past, a lot of organizations that do cloud services often receive national security letters or letters from law enforcement or subpoenas or search warrants from uh, law enforcement asking for certain data. So do you have a solution for companies that have to protect their data often from you, uh, to be able to for them to do business effectively?
Yes, absolutely. We actually have some of our customers that don't want us, that actually have blocked us out of their environment because of that exact reason. They want complete control, and they just really want us to provide the security in the environment for them to operate their data. And they have pretty sophisticated IT shops that could probably do this themselves, but it's just more cost effective for them to host with us than to build their own. Now, for us, to answer the other part of your question, this is a great question to ask every cloud provider that you work for, because you'll get one or two answers. If you ask the cloud providers, how does your engineer reach out and fix my VM if I need you to go and look at my VM? What you'll find from folks who do the level of service that we do is they actually use a shared password, a common password between all of the engineers that allows ability to audit and track. and that's how they accomplish that. Or they'll tell you, we just don't do that service. Your VM is your business. You take care of it yourself. Now, where we're different is we actually have a privileged access management tool that we use, as well as a two-factor authentication jump post that all of our engineers have to go to the jump post first, authenticate with two-factor authentication. Then from the jump post, they go and they pull a one-time password from our privileged access management system, and only then are they allowed to access the customer's VM to do any kind of work that the customer's asked us to do. And then all that is monitored for the Windows servers. It's monitored with an actual video capture of the session, and then with the Linux systems, we do key logging, so that we have that auditability to go back if a customer comes back and says, hey, this shouldn't have happened on our machine. We have the ability to actually go back and look at those sessions of where our engineer and audit what our engineers actually did. So that's a great question that everyone should ask. If you're really looking for security, do you want someone to have a common password that works on other servers to have access to your infrastructure? And I would think the answer is usually going to be no.
Let's you guys know something about containers, right?
It's really not my area of expertise. I'll throw it over to Chase to see. You're talking about the Amazon container environment?
Well, like Docker.
Yeah, sure. I know Docker and some of those tools, sure.
Well, why would somebody use that? Why would somebody dock their application, let's say?
Well, I think really with the whole growth in that area has been around the fact that it's very portable and it's really easy to integrate stuff from multiple instances. You got a lot of people that are doing their dev work outside of the country. You got people that have got teams in Seattle while their headquarters is in Texas, and then they've got dev stuff in Russia or in Kuala Lumpur or whatever, you name it. So they've got all these little things going on across multiple environments doing everything to make this application work. And it used to be where you basically had to make sure that as you were writing code and as you were developing stuff that you had to everything on the same thread the whole way through. The nightmare process, where now with Docker and some of the other tools like that, you can go and say, hey, you guys, you've got 1 month. I want you to go write this piece of code that does this, and when it's done, put it in this Docker, send it over to me. I'm going to bolt it in, and then we're up and running. And it's just that simple. It makes stuff really, really easy, really portable, and it also removes that question that people used to have about, I paid these guys 50 grand to write this snippet of code for me. Is it going to work, precisely the way I want it to when I bolt it together? Now that's not a question because everything's been containerized and it's literally plug and play.
How's that any different than Java? Like,
well,
if you're writing...
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about Docker and some of the other ones that are like that is that Java is the language that you're going to use for whatever you're going to do. But with Docker, you can write an entire application inside of Docker in whatever language you need it to be written in, and then you take it and use it and bolt it into something else to do another function. So having those containerized components available to you, especially for the developer side and for the architecture and engineer side of things, it just makes it where the worry and the stress about what's going to work with what, as long as it's built into the Docker environment and the Docker environment matches where you're going to use it, it's fire it up and roll.
Now, would you use containers with VMs? I mean, it seems like, let's say you do have a Java application, it seems like you have a physical machine, then you have a virtual machine, and then you have Docker, and then you would have your JVM. I mean, that's like 4 machines. Isn't that overkill?
Well,
or does that actually work?
Well, so a lot of times, like what we've done and what I've sort of worked on some of my own things on the side is you've got your physical machine that you're using for the basic, because you have to have something to type on, right? And then you've got your virtual machine, which is your sort of lab environment or your testing environment, and then your Docker is something that you're just going to run within that VM. You can run your Java code, write your scripts, write your programs, build your application inside of the Docker environment. You don't really need to worry about whether or not you're leveraging a particular library or some weird thing from GitHub that you didn't know about. It's all there, so it's just plug and play, and it makes it super super easy to do really advanced development and really advanced engineering projects. And then you just bring it together, Frankenstein the monster, stitch it together, and there you go.
And is there a big performance hit if you use a
No,
container?
No, it's not a big performance hit. Now, if you try and like run, I mean, if you have your laptop and you're trying to do, hardcore dev and you're running 3 or 4 VMs at the same time with 6 or 8 Docker instances on each different VM, trying to make them all talk to each other, then yeah, things are going to go a little bit bonkers. But really, if on an enterprise level and a corporate level, if you're doing it right, what you should be doing is having the guys that are developing the applications and the code and things like that, building everything with a containerized system, whether it's Docker or whatever else, making sure that everything is perfectly functioning within the container, then bring it together, bolt it inside a server environment where you've got lots of horsepower and single dedicated threads going on, and then run that stuff the way you ought to run it. And that's really how it ought to be done. But yeah, I mean, if and I've been doing some stuff lately on just home messing around where if I've had a couple of VMs up at the same time and a couple of Docker instances, and I try and make them talk back and forth, one will crash. But that's usually because I just didn't put something right together with the VM. It's not the Docker, it's not the container itself.
Now, let's talk about availability. Do these containers scale across multiple physical machines?
One of the really interesting things that's sort of come around in the last, say, 2 years in cloud is the use of what they're calling sharding, where you've got say you go out and you build this really cool whiz-bang, super awesome big data application that chews through 1 billion lines of code a second or something, right? And then you need to figure out how to leverage that, but you can't possibly do it by buying hard servers because you'd go broke. So what they do is they shard that stuff, and they'll take a MongoDB with 2 or 3 backups and a couple of processors and everything else and put it into one big shard, and then they take that shard and drop it into a data center, and that's what's actually going to run all those big data processing systems and the algorithms and everything else. And then what it's doing is it's basically chewing the large stuff into something small that can be used by the final sort of end recipient. And whether or not they built it with a containerized system like Docker or something like that, usually the scale there is never an issue because what they've done is they've negated the problem with scale by using those shards. So you have one server that's got 7 or 8 shards on it doing the work of what used to be 70 VMs.
So if your application is not built from a parallel programming standpoint, you can still use sharding to distribute that?
In theory, you could. You definitely would probably want to. Honestly, most of the time now, when I'm looking at applications like that are built for that sort of dual processing capability, massive big data, or things along those lines, even if it's something that they bolted together and sort of made it work, it's always really where it does parallel processing. Because honestly, even if you move that stuff to a hardcore dedicated cloud environment with lots of resources behind it, if you haven't built it the right way and done it where it can handle that, you're not getting your reward on what you've invested. So it's better to spend 2 more months in dev doing containerized and parallel processing and et cetera, to make sure that when you drop it into that sharded, that's sort of a funny word, right? When you drop it into that sharded sort of environment and you're actually using parallel processing across those multiple VMs and servers, like you're getting your bang for your buck.
I was taking notes because we're looking at trying to implement containers at where I work. So I'm trying to make sure that we're doing that in as secure a way as possible. So that information is quite helpful.
Yep. Yeah, Jeff does a great point of pointing out that one of the primary areas that the bad guys leverage to get at networks is through dev environments because they're usually remote access. Guys are dumping lots of stuff back and forth. People are publishing things. It just goes sideways really quickly. So one of the really good things, honestly, if you're going to use a containerized system like Docker or something along those lines, is that if you put that in a bulletproof dev environment where you've taken care of the 2-factor authentication and you've got things locked down and you're not allowing anybody else to get in and out of there like they shouldn't be, the fact that you're using a containerized system to build out your code in your application just provides you another level on top of everything to say that our source code and what we're using to actually run our applications and the stuff that literally makes our business grow and thrive is being built in a secure fashion. Because it's like, that's like having a vault within a vault and then a safe inside the vault, and then, you know, somebody with a mag lock inside the safe.
Excellent.
And I mean, me personally, if I'm building some super awesome application that I thought could, you know, change, I don't know, healthcare or finance or something like that, I absolutely would have that in a bulletproof, secure dev environment with containerized stuff going on and every form of authentication and remediation available to me. Because I mean, you could go broke in a heartbeat if somebody stole your source code, or if you built something that was going to be really cool and really change things, and then, you know, your competitor debuts it 30 days before you roll it out because they actually were paying attention to your GitHub account or something.
All right. Well, Chase and Jeff, if there was a company that wanted to move into the cloud, how would they go about getting hold of FireHost? What makes you what would make you better than, say, the Amazons or the Azures or the Google Computes of the world in terms of migrating their applications and stuff to the cloud?
Well, first off, if they go to our website, which is FireHost, FireHost.com, they'll actually get a human that'll engage them from the time they hit our website in a live chat session. And that's not some, you know, third-party chat in an offshore outsource. That's someone who actually works, you know, as a security advisor that works at FireHost that engages every new customer. And from day one, we walk them through the journey of how do you migrate what you have in your environment now, and how can we help you and be a value of it. If you go to other cloud hosting providers, they pretty much just want you to slide your credit card and kind of figure it out yourself. The other piece, when you when you stand up a virtual machine inside of our environment, it is encapsulated in a security shell that we call our intelligence security model. That's already it's already built with a layered security approach at every layer of the OSI model to protect that VM. Whereas you go to other hosting providers, you stand up a VM from the moment you connect that thing to the internet, it's vulnerable until you go out to their marketplace and you start buying, whatever network security tools, host level security tools that they have to bolt on it to make it, to get that last, that application, that OS level and that application layer security in place. That can take hours, that could take days, or it could be never. So we're pretty much a turnkey operation that has humans behind it that are willing to walk people through the journey of moving from their home infrastructure to a cloud hosting provider. And I know Chase has some great thoughts on this as well, so I'll throw it over to him.
Yeah, it looks like he is on mute. Okay, well, while we're waiting for Chase to come back, let me ask, you've got, obviously you have to follow certain parameters. You mentioned your IT model. So are you following some kind of framework like ISO or the cloud security matrix, or some kind of industry-wide framework that would there's Chase. Hey, Chase. That would go ahead.
Yeah, we subscribe to the Universal Control Framework, which maps to ISO, maps to PCI, maps to HIPAA, and as well as FFIEC. I mean, you can throw just about any acronym at it, and those controls map pretty well. So that's our baseline control framework that we use, is the Unified Control Framework.
Okay.
What about uptime? Can you guys pretty much guarantee 100% uptime?
Well, no one can do 100% uptime. I mean, if anybody tells you that, that's kind of like a security person telling you that they can guarantee you that you're not going to get infected. But we have a service level agreement with our customers for 5 nines, which most of the environments that our competitors only go for 99.9, and you're saying, well, what's the difference between 99.9 and 99.999? Well, 5 nines is minutes in downtime a year for a VM, and 3 nines can be days. And so there's a huge difference between 3 nines and 5 nines. And we SLA at 5 nines.
Okay. So you have a data center, I would
Sorry
imagine.
about that.
Oh, that's okay, Chase. So you guys have a data center in Dallas. Do you have a backup site somewhere?
We actually have 5 data centers. We have a data center in Dallas. We have one in Phoenix. We have one in Singapore, one in Amsterdam, and one in London.
Wow. So you have support people in each one of those areas. Are you chasing the sun in that respect?
No, we have two locations. We have the Dallas Fort Worth is the main headquarters, which is where about 80% of the workforce is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a support team and a very small sales team in the UK office that it would do a little bit of chase the sun, but not quite. They, basically the UK office does our early morning and morning shifts. But we manage all of our infrastructure remotely. We don't have to be on site. All of our infrastructure is located at colo sites, and we get service from a colo provider.
All right, and your guys' website is firehost.com?
Yep, HOST. A lot of people
Yeah.
want to say FireHose, as in
Yeah.
something firemen use, or
Yeah.
FireHouse, which is another place firemen use, but it's
Yeah.
FireHost.
Actually, it's a
As in
pretty
hosting.
decent sub place too. Firehouse.
That's
Sub.
right.
Yeah, Firehouse Subs is pretty good. I'll give you
Yeah,
that.
ain't gonna lie. So,
Yep.
No, I can't hate on that.
all right. Well, I mean, that's all the questions I had, Mr. Betcher. Do you have anything else?
No.
Okay. Chase, Jeff, do you have anything else you'd like to mention before we go?
Go ahead, Chase.
Oh, I was just going to say, before the lightning literally hit my backyard and knocked out my internet, I just think from the cloud provider piece that folks should really consider how valuable their companies are and how valuable the data is in the applications that they built. And if they're considering migrating to the cloud, like you were asking about earlier, I think a lot of companies don't do themselves enough of a favor by considering how much security should benefit that organization instead of how much of a hindrance it can be. Because how much more of a hindrance is it to go broke overnight because somebody stole your intellectual property? And what Jeff was saying earlier about the way that we sort of work to keep people as secure as possible. It's a life cycle thing, and we try really hard at it. Personally, if it's my company, I'm not going to put my stuff anywhere that I don't have eyes on it 24/7. People move to the cloud all the time. Great, you get access to resources and you get cheap, infrastructure. But cheap has a price as well. Usually the flip side of cheap is if you buy a cheap car and you drive across the desert, you're probably going to wind up hiking across the desert.
Sure. Yeah, you get what you pay for. So.
Amen to that.
Yep. So I mean,
my final thought would be, think about the human.
Think about the human.
Leverage the security technology.
Probably
just
Hang on.
protecting your environment. And we had an interesting situation where we had a customer in the other day, and we have 4, like Chase, we have 3 other, we have a total of 4 former NSA employees that work with us, and just so happens all 4 of them were standing around the desk, and I had a customer in, and I said, we have a lot of good people who have a great pedigree in security. And I looked at our team. I said, if you used to work at NSA, raise your hand. And it just so happened everybody within view of the customer rose their hand. And that was a pretty good visual. Marketing guy said, I missed my calling. I should have been a marketing guy. But I think that it's very important that you do understand the human element of who's watching and protecting your and not just trusting that technology is going to secure your infrastructure.
Very cool. Very cool. So if anybody wanted to get a hold of you guys specifically, is there a way we can do that? Or do you guys are giving any talks anywhere? Can we find you on Twitter? That kind of thing.
Yeah, we have a couple of Twitter things. We've also got our own our own sort of podcast that we do every week. We have a group called the Threat Resistance Unit (TRU).
Mm-hmm.
We have our own Twitter feed as well as our own video series, which is FireHost at TRU is what you can look for there. You can also look us up on YouTube, which is FireHost_TRU. We do those every week, and we really try and give folks the breakdown on the realities behind security without any of the marketing fluff and things that could obscure the topic. And me personally, if somebody wants to reach out to me, I speak all the time, all over the place. But Chase.Cunningham at FireEHOA.com. I'm more than glad to talk and answer questions anytime.
Yeah, same here. Chase also left out the fact that he's the author of an animated series called Senja, which is a serial comic, to get young kids interested in cybersecurity. So I'm going to plug that for you. I know he's that's one of his passions is making sure that he's getting young kids involved and interested in cybersecurity. And for me, I'm a regular contributor to Dark Reading, which is a security online publication. I usually write at least one article a month for them, as well as like Chase. I'm out probably a couple of times a month at speaking events, and it's just jeff.schilling, SCHILLING, at firehost.com. Just reach out if anybody has any questions and wants any help in moving to the cloud. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, well, that was it for this week on Breaking Down Security. I have a Twitter. My Twitter handle is @BrianBreak, and Mr. Betcher is @BetcherPwned. We have Facebook fan page at facebook.com/breakingdownsec. We're on the cybrary.it. We have an official forum over there. You can get on Cybrary IT and get yourself a little training. They just unveiled a new end user security training. So if your company's looking for end user security training, you can hit them up over there at cybrary.it. They don't pay us for that. It's just I've done several of their courses and they're just really good. They've got some. I'm doing their Python for pen testers, and they have a Metasploit course, which is pretty decent as well. So
I knew you looked a little smarter today.
really well. I also worked out,
Yeah.
so I feel like crap, but I'm only
Protein shake.
and a protein shake. Right. So we're on Tumblr. Not a lot on Tumblr, but we do have a Tumblr, and we have a LinkedIn group. And thank you to our patrons. If you're a patron, we appreciate you. If you want to support us, value for value, if you find value in our podcast, and if you find value in the interview you just heard, please feel free to go over to patreon.com and show your support. Completely voluntary. The podcast will always be free to those who want it. But that was it for this week. Great little podcast. Great little interview here with Jeff and Chase. So come back soon for more Breaking Down Security. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.